We're just testing the mic. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. اللهم فقهنا في الدين. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us with beneficial knowledge and allow us to benefit from that beneficial knowledge and to give us an increase in knowledge. Inshallah, we're continuing with the study of the Quran, one of the most blessed things that a Muslim does in his or her life, whether it's in this month or outside of this month. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make it purely for His sake and to accept it from us and to make this Quran a light of guidance for us, inshallah, in this world as well as in the hereafter. Today, inshallah, is our 13th session, and we will be covering parts of the 12th Juz, the beginning of Surah Yusuf, as well as, inshallah, the 13th Juz, which includes the rest of Surah Yusuf, Surah Al-Ra'd, and Surah Ibrahim. And again, all these surahs, they seem to have been revealed around the same time, this surah and the ones before it as well, in Mecca, towards the end of the Prophet ﷺ's stay in Mecca. And therefore you will see that the tone is a lot harsher. And it does also talk about the persecution of the Prophet ﷺ, in the sense that the stories that are mentioned within it are stories of the other prophets and other believers being persecuted, as if to say to the believers who are with the Prophet ﷺ, you are not alone in this suffering. Before you, there were other nations, and the believers from amongst them also suffered. And they remained patient, and they endured whatever hardships they went through. And in the end, Allah Azza wa Jal blessed them in this world as well in the hereafter. And so the first surah we're going to take, inshallah, today is Surah Yusuf. And it's actually a very beautiful surah. It's one of it's the only surah actually in the Quran that talks about a prophet from the beginning to the end of the surah. And so we hear from the beginning of the surah how Yusuf alayhi salam, he comes to his father talking about a dream that he had, and all the way to the end where Yusuf alayhi salam is talking about his death, or when his death will happen. And so This surah, since it was revealed towards the end, it was revealed after the year of sorrow that the Prophet ﷺ experienced, a year in which his wife Khadija radiallahu anha, who was one of the first believers and the one who supported the Prophet ﷺ right from the beginning, she passed away. His uncle Abu Talib, who used to support him, who used to protect him, also passed away. And it wasn't just an ordinary death. He died upon disbelief, and that, you can imagine, must have grieved the Prophet ﷺ a lot as well. Apart from this, the Prophet ﷺ, he had also gone to Ta'if to call the people to Islam there and hopefully have a safe haven there. And he was shunned from there as well, and the people, they kicked him out, sending their kids and their servants out there to pelt rocks at the Prophet ﷺ, until his feet got bloodied, his whole body was bloodied, and his sandals were getting stuck to his feet. And imagine, this is the Prophet ﷺ. And in this state, the angel Jibreel alayhi salam, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he says that if you were to say it, we can bring these two mountains together and crush all the inhabitants of this city. The ones who have kicked you out like this, the ones who have treated a prophet, a messenger of Allah, in this manner. And instead, the Prophet ﷺ, being the mercy to mankind that he was, he said that he hoped that from them and those to follow, there would be Muslims. And subhanAllah, when you look at that city today, it is a city filled with Muslims. And so this was actually a very hard time for the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, when one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ asked him about the toughest thing that he had experienced, he mentioned this instance. And so this was a very tough time for the Prophet ﷺ. And it is after this that the night journey took place. And it is also after this that the surah is revealed. And in this surah, there are many comparable things. There are many parallels between the life of Yusuf alayhi salam and the trials and hardships that he went through, and the trials that the Prophet ﷺ was going through. And so this is, again, to comfort the Prophet ﷺ and the believers as well. We had spoken about in the previous surah the importance of reliance and how Allah Azza wa Jal put a heavy emphasis on tawakkul, on having our reliance upon Allah Azza wa Jal, on trusting Allah Azza wa Jal for all our affairs. And in this, he is furthering that and also mentioning that we must be patient as well. We should put our trust in Allah. We should be patient in all that we deal with, and we should trust in Allah, the one who is in charge of all the affairs. And now, insha'Allah, we will talk about this surah, and there are actually great lessons within this surah. And this is actually a surah that people would normally spend a long time in talking about, but we actually have to cover this surah and the two after it as well. So we're going to try to take the main points or the main lessons that we can learn from the surah. And so in the beginning, Allah Azza wa Jal, he mentions that this is, that Allah Azza wa Jal, he narrates the best of stories. The stories that Allah Azza wa Jal has narrated in the Quran, they're not stories without morals. They're not stories without lessons. There are stories in there provided for a reason. They've been narrated to us for a reason, for us to learn from, for us to stay away from the mistakes of the previous nations, and also for us to take from the guidance of those who were guided. And this surah was actually so the reason for sending the surah down was actually because the Bani Israel, some from amongst the Bani Israel, they had come to Quraysh, and they thought that this would be a challenge that the Prophet ﷺ would not be able to answer. They asked, what got the Bani Israel into Egypt? How did Bani Israel, the ones who were not from Egypt, end up in Egypt? And so they thought that because the Arabs did not know about this, and even amongst the Bani Israel, this would be known amongst the learned people. They thought that the Prophet ﷺ would not be able to answer this, but Allah Azza wa Jal, he revealed the surah all in one go to answer their challenge. And once again, we see that anytime these challenges get answered, the people, they don't turn to Islam, because their reason, or the reason behind them challenging or asking for these challenges is not so that they could accept Islam once these challenges get answered. It's just an excuse for them not to accept the message of Islam. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, He revealed this chapter as a reason, but the main purpose behind it, the main purpose behind the revelation was to actually give support to the Prophet ﷺ and to give support to the believers. The reason, as we mentioned, was because of the questioning, the challenge, but the purpose that we can call the divine purpose in Allah Azza wa Jal revealing this surah is to give us the firmness that we need to stay in this religion, to remain patient, and to realize that the end is always for the believers. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, He starts the surah off mentioning the dream that Yusuf alayhi salam has, that he narrates to his prophet, to his father, who was Prophet Yaqub. And as we had mentioned, Prophet Yaqub is the one known as Israel as well. So when we say Bani Israel, we're talking about the descendants of Israel, the descendants of Yaqub alayhi salam. He had 12 sons, and this is where we get the 12 tribes as well. And one of these 12 was Yusuf alayhi salam. And Yusuf alayhi salam, in his dream, he saw that 11 stars were bowing down to him, as well as the sun and moon. And so his father, he realized that this meant that Yusuf alayhi salam would as well be a prophet, and that there was something great in his future. But at the same time, he also realized that this would cause his other brothers to be jealous. The Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam had one full brother, and the other 10 that he had were actually from another mother. And so these brothers, as it was, they were very jealous. They used to feel that their father used to favor Yusuf alayhi salam and his brother, who the older scriptures call Binyamin, Benjamin, but in our books, by the Prophet ﷺ or in the Quran, this name hasn't come except as the brother of Yusuf alayhi salam. Therefore, I'm just going to stick with that as well. I'm just going to call him the brother of Yusuf alayhi salam. So they were jealous of Yusuf alayhi salam and his brother, and they felt that they were the stronger ones. They felt that they were the ones larger in number who could be relied upon. And so they thought that their father was misguided in favoring Yusuf alayhi salam and his brother. Now, as we all know, us as parents, we have the duty given to us by Allah Azza wa Jal to be fair with all our children. But at times, there can be a favor shown to one child, like in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, because of the greatness that Yusuf alayhi salam embodied. His father knew that he would be a prophet. And so even though it was unintentional, even though Yaqub alayhi salam was not trying to show that, he knew that his brothers were jealous, and so he told his son to not relay this dream to the brothers. And so his brothers, they got jealous of Yusuf alayhi salam, and what they said was, we're just going to get rid of him. One said, we're going to throw him in a faraway land, we're going to get rid of him that way. Another said, we're going to kill him, until they all decided that they were going to throw him in a well, and that, there might be a caravan that takes him away. And that's what they decided on doing. And each time they would go to their father, Yaqub alayhi salam, to allow Yusuf alayhi salam to accompany them out, whenever they would go out to play and to have fun, Yaqub alayhi salam, he would make excuses knowing that they did have ill intentions. And so he said, I fear that you might be gone and a wolf comes and eats him. And so, they eventually convinced their father. They said, how is it that could happen if we are there? If that happens, then we will be the losers. We are the ones who will be blameworthy. And so eventually Yaqub alayhi salam, he gave in to their demands. And so they did as they had wanted to do. They threw him in the well. Imagine Yusuf alayhi salam, a young child, being thrown in the well in the darkness there. And even in the darkness of the cave, Allah Azza wa Jal reveals to him that not only will He save him, but that Yusuf alayhi salam will actually get a chance to recount what his brothers had done to him without them even realizing who Yusuf alayhi salam was. And so this is a journey that Allah Azza wa Jal wanted Yusuf alayhi salam to take. In this journey, he was enslaved. In this journey, he was seduced. And he remained patient, and he put his trust in Allah. And because of that, because of not responding to the calls of seduction, he was thrown into prison. And in prison, he was actually given a chance to give da'wah as well. He asked the people there, he said, what makes more sense? To worship multiple lords, those who can't even agree on one thing, and they will just be quarreling amongst each other, or worshiping the one true God, the all-powerful God who does as he pleases to do. And so even in prison, Yusuf alayhi salam, he took this opportunity to call people towards Islam, towards submission. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions that when Yusuf alayhi salam reached maturity, Allah Azza wa Jal gave him the wisdom, He gave him the knowledge. And subhanAllah, when we look at it so far, we look at how Allah says that you will be telling your brothers what they did to you. You will recount what they did. They will have to humble themselves to you. This is also, within this is also an implicit message to the Prophet ﷺ that you too will recall to your people, the Quraysh, who are going to kick you out of Mecca. They're about to kick you out in the same way that Yusuf alayhi salam was kicked out of his lands. He was kicked out from his home. When you are kicked out as well, you shall return back to this land, and they will be the ones who will be humbled. They will be the ones who will be seeking forgiveness from you. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, in this journey of his, he ends up in the prison, and even in the prison, he is calling, as we said, towards Allah Azza wa Jal, towards submitting to Him. And Allah Azza wa Jal over here also mentions that He gave him the ability to interpret dreams. And two of the people who were also in prison, they came to him with their dreams. And the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, he interpreted those dreams, and he mentioned that one of them would be killed and crucified, and the other one, the interpretation was that he would actually end up being close to the ruler, being close to the significant people in society. And that is what happened. And so at this moment, Yusuf alayhi salam, he spoke to the one who he realized would be saved and who would get close to the ruler, to also mention his case in front of the ruler. Because this person had seen firsthand that Yusuf alayhi salam was someone who was righteous. Yusuf alayhi salam could not be a criminal. And so when this person left prison, Shaitan made him forget the case of Yusuf alayhi salam for many years after this. Until the king one day in his dream, he sees something very weird. And this really bothers him. So he tells the people around him, he mentions to them what his dream was. And so he says, who can interpret this dream to me? And so they all said, these are just confused visions that you had. These are just confused dreams that you had. And we cannot interpret these kind of dreams. But this person who had been in prison with Yusuf alayhi salam, he remembered that Yusuf alayhi salam was someone who could do so. And so he said, I can get you the interpretation of this dream. And so the interpretation was taken from Yusuf alayhi salam. And when he was able to interpret this dream, which was basically that they would have 7 years of good rain where they would be able to harvest a lot of crop, this would be followed by 7 years of hardship where there would be no rain, where there would be a famine. And therefore it was very important for them to store whatever they had grown from the crops within these 7 years so that they could ration it out over the famine. The king, he was so happy that he wanted to call Yusuf alayhi salam and make him amongst those who will be the closest of people to him. And so when the messenger came to Yusuf alayhi salam in prison, instead of accepting this great offer, imagine us having been in prison for so long unjustly, knowing that we're innocent. We would have taken that opportunity to get out of the prison. Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't want to do so. He wanted to clear his name. He was a prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal. He could not have his name tarnished. Someone whose name's tarnished is someone who cannot people to goodness, because they're always going to use that tarnished image against them in not accepting the truth. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he asked for his name to be cleared. And so the people, they went to the ladies who were basically the friends of the wife of his master who had tried to seduce him, and they all mentioned only good things about him. And even the lady then, she mentioned that it was actually her who had tried to do the evil act, and Yusuf alayhi salam was indeed from the righteous people. And so in this way, Allah Azza wa Jal was able to clear the name of Yusuf alayhi salam. And this also shows us the importance of clearing our name when our name is falsely being tarnished. Many people think, oh, I'm sincere for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Even if people badmouth me, that's fine. But we have seen, even in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if someone blames you for something that is not true, you're supposed to defend yourself. You're supposed to clear your name. Obviously, if there's something that you did do, you can't do much about it except for making tawbah to Allah Azza wa Jal. But if you're unjustly being blamed for something, then in this case, it is essential for you to clear your name. And so now, Yusuf alayhi salam, he becomes someone who is held close to the king. In fact, he says that you are someone who will be honored and you will be someone who will be trusted as well. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he asks to be put in charge of the storage, of the storehouses of their nation. And the reason for doing so is because the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, he said he was someone who was strong and someone who was trustworthy. He wouldn't give in to injustice. He wouldn't give in to other people coming and offering bribes or something of that sort. And so he was made the ruler or the one in charge of these storehouses. In the meantime, Yaqub alayhi salam, he was also dealing with the loss of Yusuf alayhi salam. And his brothers, they had mentioned that indeed what Yaqub alayhi salam had feared would happen is what happened, that the wolf came and it ate Yusuf alayhi salam. And they brought his shirt that had false blood on it, meaning blood from another sheep, just so that they could make it seem like this was the blood of Yusuf alayhi salam. And Yaqub alayhi salam, he was a prophet. Right away he realized that this was just a lie from them. And he saw that, he realized that, when an animal eats the shirt, when the animal eats a person, it's not going to leave the shirt intact in this way. And so he remained patient, and he said that it is Allah Azza wa Jal to whom he will plead his case to. He will remain patient, and he will only mention his problems to Allah Azza wa Jal. And in this is also a great lesson for us. Many a times when we go through hardships, we start to complain to people around us. But as mentioned here by Yaqub alayhi salam, when we complain, it should only be to Allah Azza wa Jal. It should only be to Allah Azza wa Jal that we turn to. And even this complaint is not a complaint of ingratitude. We don't say, oh Allah, why are you putting me through this misery? It is a complaint such as, oh Allah, you know that I'm going through such a hard time. And then you can ask him for any help. You can ask him for the support that you need. And so Yaqub alayhi salam, in this state, he had become so sad and he had wept so much for the loss of his son that he became blind. But at the same time, he told his sons, he said that I know that which you do not know. I know from Allah Azza wa Jal that which you do not know. And that was the fact that Yusuf alayhi salam, he was a prophet. He could not be taken away in this way. He could not be killed in this way. And so now going back to the time of Yusuf alayhi salam being in charge of the storehouses, the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, they too grow desperate and they need this as well. And so they go to Yusuf alayhi salam, and without recognizing Yusuf alayhi salam, they ask for the provisions and they pay whatever needs to be paid for it. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, there is another brother that you have as well. And this was the full brother of Yusuf alayhi salam, from the same mother. And he said, if you do not bring him to me, I won't give you any more portions of that, of these crops, of this food, of these rations. And so they went back to their father, and they pleaded to their father to allow the brother of Yusuf alayhi salam to also accompany them to Egypt. And Yaqub alayhi salam, he said, how can I trust you remembering what you had done to Yusuf? You would probably do the same to Yusuf alayhi salam. And so when he realized there was no other way, if they didn't do so, they wouldn't get any more food, he took an oath from them that they would not give his brother up unless they were completely surrounded by the enemies and they had to give him up. And so they all took that oath and they went to Egypt to try to collect, more food. And so when they got there, Yusuf alayhi salam, he told his brother that it was actually him. And this is his full brother that we're talking about. And the rest of the brothers were oblivious of this fact. And when they started to leave, Yusuf alayhi salam slipped his cup, his vessel, into the belongings of his brother, who we said is referred to as Binyamin by the other scriptures. And so when the caravan of the brothers left back to go back to where they were from, there was a caller who shouted and said that the cup or the vessel of Yusuf alayhi salam has been stolen. And so when they found the cup, it was found in the belongings of the brother of Yusuf alayhi salam. And over here, we see that the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam still didn't learn their lesson. They said, if he has stolen, then he's just like his brother Yusuf. Even his brother Yusuf had stolen in the past. And so subhanAllah, you can imagine that after having done all this injustice to their brother, they continue to do this to Yusuf alayhi salam. They continue to try to defame Yusuf alayhi salam. And so now they go back to Yusuf alayhi salam and they plead to him, take one of us instead. Whatever happens, take one of us. And so Yusuf alayhi salam, he mentions that this would be a great injustice if he were to do so. And so the brothers, they all go back to Yaqub alayhi salam, except for one of them. He remembered his oath. He said, we had promised that we would not return without our brother. So I'm going to stay here. The rest of the brothers, they go. And Yaqub alayhi salam, once again, he reminds them of their evil actions. And in this state, he then gets hope. He says, no one loses hope in the mercy of Allah except for those who disbelieve. And so then he said, go out and look for your brother. Go out and look, and maybe you will even find Yusuf alayhi salam. Not just his brother, but also Yusuf alayhi salam. And so they went out, except for, whoever was present with him. And when they went to Yusuf alayhi salam, this time, they mentioned to him that their father was someone who had reached old age. And realizing this, Yusuf alayhi salam, he felt sorry about the state that they were in. These are his brothers. It's his father who's grieving. And so he asks them, do you remember what you did to Yusuf while you were ignorant? And so then they realize that this was actually Yusuf. And Yusuf alayhi salam says, yes, it is me. It is Yusuf. I am Yusuf, and this is my brother. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He has favored me with all these favors. He starts to recount His favors. And then He says, whoever is patient, whoever has taqwa, innahu man yattaqi wa yasbir. Whoever has taqwa of Allah Azza wa Jal, and whoever is patient, then Allah Azza wa Jal does not allow for their reward to go to waste. And so in this way, he was showing his brothers he was able to achieve the greatness. And this is when the brothers realized their mistakes. They realized their fault. And they asked forgiveness. They asked him to forgive him. And Yusuf alayhi salam, being the prophet of Allah, being the great man that he was, he did forgive him. He did forgive all of them. And over here, I will just mention something briefly that a scholar from the past, Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, he mentioned. He had mentioned that the 12 months of the year are like the 12 siblings, the 12 brothers, Yusuf alayhi salam, the children of Yaqub alayhi salam. And the month of Ramadan is like Yusuf alayhi salam. And through his forgiveness for his brothers, they were able to be forgiven. Likewise, this month of Ramadan is a month, the mercy and the forgiveness that is within this month can be a means for forgiveness for the rest of the month, for the rest of the months of the year for us as well. And so it is a chance for us to once again reflect on this moment that we're in Ramadan. Many of us, our level of worship, our level of dedication in this month starts to dip in these middle 10 days, because that excitement that we had upon, when Ramadan started, it starts to slowly fade away. And for many of us, that doesn't come back until the last 10 nights of Ramadan, realizing that Laylatul Qadr is within those nights. But also, it's these 10 middle days that are also very important for us. These are not days to be neglected. These are not days to be taken for granted. Make use of this time. Remember that these, as Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned, are just a limited number of days. Ayyaman ma'dudat. These are just a limited number of days that are going to end. So don't waste your time doing things that you will regret later on. In the same way that when you are in that crucial period of writing a test, when you're writing a test, you don't waste a single second. You don't say, okay, let me relax for a few minutes, and then I'm going to get back to answering the questions, realizing that this is the only chance that you have. And like that is this month of Ramadan as well. This is a month in which Allah Azza wa Jal forgives those who turn to Him. So turn to Him. Show your acts of obedience to Him. Do extra acts of worship in this month as well. And so now what happens is Yusuf alayhi salam tells his brothers to go back to Yaqub alayhi salam and to bring him. And he also gives a shirt of his. And this is a miracle. When it is put on the face of Yaqub alayhi salam, his eyesight comes back. And he tells them, did I not tell you that I know from Allah that which you do not know? That same thing he had said to them when they had said that, Yusuf alayhi salam was killed because a wolf ate him. He had mentioned then that he knew that which they did not know. Once again over here, he recalls that. And they all come to Egypt. And Yusuf alayhi salam, he draws them close, and they all bow down to him. And at this time, it was allowed for them to bow down to people. And this was a bowing of respect. It was a bowing done to show respect. It was not an act of worship. But in our Sharia, after the Prophet ﷺ, he came, he has made it clear that we are not allowed to bow down to anyone or anything, whether it's for honoring them, whether it's worshiping them. It is only Allah Azza wa Jal who we dedicate our sujood, our prostrating, and our bowing down to. And so in this way, that dream that Yusuf alayhi salam had so many years ago as a child, it got fulfilled. The 11 stars were his brothers bowing down to him right now. The sun and the moon were his parents bowing down to him. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, in this, He's comforting the believers, He's comforting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whatever hardships you're going through, remain patient, have taqwa, and look at how Yusuf alayhi salam was repaid for it in this world. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, and the reward in the hereafter is better. After mentioning all these favors that Yusuf alayhi salam got in this world, Allah says, the reward that the believer has in the hereafter, the one who is fearful of Allah, the one who is a believer of Allah, their reward in the hereafter will be greater than anything that they get in this world. And then to conclude, Yusuf alayhi salam, he asks Allah Azza wa Jal that, you have given me all these favors. And then he says, Fatir as-samawat, you are the creator of the heavens and the earth. Tawaffani musliman. He says to Allah Azza wa Jal, cause me to die as a Muslim. Wa alhiqni bis-salihin. And bring me together or make me of those who will be the righteous people in the hereafter. Make sure that I am with them as well. And so this is a prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal making this dua, that he die upon Tawheed, upon Islam, while being a Muslim, upon being someone who submits to Allah Azza wa Jal. Therefore, it is even essential for us to be making this dua to Allah Azza wa Jal. Tawaffani musliman wa alhiqni bis-salihin. Realizing all the favors of Allah Azza wa Jal, and also realizing that the greatest favor that Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed us with is Islam. Therefore, we ask Allah to guide us to Islam, to keep us on this faith, to keep us firm on this faith, and also allow us to die while we are in this state. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He concludes this surah, and He mentions, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ. In these stories are signs, in these stories are morals and lessons. For who? لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. For those who understand, for those who will take heed. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا يُفْتَرَى. These are not the Quran and these stories, these are not made up things. وَلَكِنْ تَصْدِيقَ الَّذِي بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. Rather, these stories, they have come confirming that which Allah Azza wa Jal has revealed, the Quran. And so the Quraysh had asked for a challenge, and Allah Azza wa Jal, He answered this challenge, and it proves once again to them that this Quran is indeed from Allah Azza wa Jal. And yet, they don't submit. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, He ends the surah, He says, وَتَفْصِيلَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. Within this Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal, He has mentioned that which we need in this world. He has cleared everything for us in this Quran. And it is also a guidance, and it is also a means of mercy for us. But who is this us that we talk about? لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. For those who believe. And so this Quran, it won't be of any benefit if we don't have belief. There are many people who study the Quran, but they're not Muslims. If they get guided to Islam, then this Quran can be a book of guidance for them. But if they don't get guided to Islam, or if they die in a state other than being Muslims, then this Quran is of no use. And as Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, this Quran, for those who disbelieve, only increases them in misguidance. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to benefit from this Quran, allow us to die in the state of Islam, and to allow us to be of the believers who Allah Azza wa Jal mentions this Quran as being a source of mercy and a source of guidance for. Next, we move on to Surah Ar-Ra'd. And this, once again, is also a Makki surah. And inshallah, we're going to take this surah and the next surah real quick. There are many signs mentioned within this chapter, the signs that we find in the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. And these signs are supposed to show us the greatness of Allah. Because when the creation is so great, we're supposed to imagine how great the Creator must be of all these things. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, they get amused that this Quran has come down to you. They get amused by the fact that you have been sent as a messenger. Allah says, what is even more amusing, what is even more weird, is the fact that they don't believe in a resurrection. They say that if we die and we turn into dust, how could it be that we will be raised back up? They don't realize that they were created the first time. And so it is very easy for Allah Azza wa Jal to create you a second time. And for us to then realize that if there is a day of judgment, that means we will be held responsible for our actions. Therefore, we try to ensure that we fix our actions, that we make them pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal. And He also talks about His knowledge in great. He mentions the extent of His knowledge. Allah Azza wa Jal, He knows everything. He knows that which, the sustenance. He knows that which we say. That all these things are mentioned, talking about the great knowledge that Allah Azza wa Jal has. Therefore, He is also knowledgeable about our state, what our intentions are, what's in our heart. Therefore, don't try to trick Allah Azza wa Jal. Instead, submit inwardly and outwardly to Allah Azza wa Jal. He also talks about the lightning and thunder, and that's the reason for the naming of this surah, Ar-Ra'd. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions that the thunder, it praises Allah Azza wa Jal. When we hear the thunder, it is actually praises of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this is something that frightens the people, and Allah Azza wa Jal can choose to strike whoever He wants with this lightning, as He mentions in the surah. But at the same time, the thunder and the angels and all of the creation, they all praise Allah Azza wa Jal. And as Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions that it is He who provides the sustenance for everything, all of creation in the heavens and the earth. And He also mentions that all of creation will prostrate to Allah Azza wa Jal, whether that is willingly or whether that is unwillingly, by force. The only thing is, we have to figure out which category will we be from. Are we going to be of those who willfully prostrate to Allah, who willfully submit to Allah? Or will we be of those who will be forced into that? And on the Day of Judgment, when we regret all that we did in terms of the rebellious acts that we had done against Allah Azza wa Jal, at that time, it will be too late. Our sujood, when we try to make sujood in the hereafter, that won't benefit us in any way. Therefore, in this world, while we have the chance, we willfully submit to Allah Azza wa Jal. We willfully prostrate and bow down to Allah Azza wa Jal. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He also mentions the great reward in paradise for the believers, for those who do submit. To entice the disbelievers, it's not just that you know this is a truth. It's not just that I've given you all these proofs. But look, if you become Muslim, if you submit, you're going to have all these rewards. So it's not just from the logical point of view that Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned to them the truth of this religion, but He's also trying to entice them in other ways. But the disbelievers are those people who have allowed shaitan to become their imam. They have allowed Iblis to become their leader. And therefore, even when mentioned with, or even when given all these examples of the great virtues of the people of Jannah, of the people in paradise, many of them, they will choose to refuse to accept Islam. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, after mentioning all this, He also mentions that this is for the believers who are patient. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us from those believers who are patient. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, we move on to the next surah, Surah Ibrahim. And in this surah, once again, it's a Makki surah. It starts with the same letters that we had spoken about, Alif Lam Ra. The exception in these set of surahs was the previous surah, Surah Ar-Ra'd, that started with Alif Lam Mim Ra. And so once again, there is a very common theme in there, that of putting our trust in Allah, relying upon Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, in this surah, He mentions that Allah Azza wa Jal has sent this book down, this Quran down, so that you, meaning the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, could guide them away from the darknesses that they're in, into the light of guidance, that which will be a means of salvation for us in this world as well as the hereafter. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, He starts with the story of Musa alayhi salam. And within the story of Musa alayhi salam, we see the tawakkul that he had and the patience that he had. We see the trust that he had in Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's why, they say, وَمَا لَنَا أَلَّا نَتَوَكَّلَ عَلَى اللَّهِ. What do we have other than to have tawakkul of Allah Azza wa Jal? Therefore, the people who call to Islam, the people who call towards this religion, we must also be patient when dealing with people. We must be patient with the problems that face us, and we should also have trust in Allah. Allah is the one who can get rid of these problems, and while we're facing these problems, we're patient. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal, He has said, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Another very important thing for us to also do is to pray. Whether that prayer is the prayer that we do, the 5 daily prayers, the nafil prayers, the extra prayers, or even dua. One of the names of dua is also as-salah. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, seek help through what? Seek help from Allah Azza wa Jal through sabr, through patience, and through prayer. And Allah Azza wa Jal, in this surah, He also mentions the importance of shukr. He says that Allah Azza wa Jal, He has decreed that if you show gratitude, if you show shukr, then Allah Azza wa Jal will give you an increase. And so if that thing that we are showing gratitude for is the guidance of Allah Azza wa Jal, and we give shukr for that, then insha'Allah, Allah will give us even more guidance. If that is righteous children or a good family that we have, then when we show gratitude for that, then insha'Allah, Allah will allow for that to remain, and He can insha'Allah bless that further for us as well. Whatever it is that we have that Allah Azza wa Jal has given to us, we must show gratitude. And from a very important point over here is for us to realize that gratitude should lead us to the obedience of Allah Azza wa Jal. It is us being ungrateful to Allah when we use the blessings of Allah to displease Allah. What Allah has given to you as a favor, you try to use those favors against Allah Azza wa Jal, or against the pleasure of Allah. Therefore, from gratitude is also ensuring that which we have, the favors that we have, we use that in the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He also says that those who don't give shukr, if everyone on earth, they didn't give shukr, they didn't show gratitude to Allah for what He has given to them, that wouldn't affect Allah in any way. Because He is completely independent. He is not in need of our praise. He's not in need of our gratitude. When we show gratitude, when we give shukr, the results of that come back to us. We are the ones who benefit from that. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He talks about the deeds of the people who disbelieve, who turn away from Allah Azza wa Jal. He says that their deeds will be like the ashes being blown by severe wind. They can try to collect those ashes they won't be able to do so. Their actions will be the same. They will just be scattered all over. They won't be able to make use of any of those actions. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He also mentions that on the Day of Judgment, and when they are being punished, the weak, they will turn to those who they had followed in this world. They will say, why don't you help us in some way? We followed you in this world, in this dunya. Why don't you help us now in the hereafter? They will say, if we had been upon the guidance, we would have guided you as well. And then it's the same thing with Iblis as well, Shaitan as well. Shaitan on that day, he will completely disassociate himself from the evil people. He will say, don't blame me, blame yourself. And he will also, that is the time when we need help the most. And at that moment, that is when Iblis won't be there for us. All those idols that were worshipped besides Allah Azza wa Jal, all the gods who were worshipped besides Allah Azza wa Jal, they won't be able to benefit you in any way. Therefore, turn to Allah Azza wa Jal in this life, realizing that He's the only one who can help you when you're most in need. And therefore, He is the only one who deserves your worship. He is the only one who deserves your obedience. If you do that in this world, then He will look out for you in the hereafter. But if you turn to other than Allah Azza wa Jal, then when you need Allah, He will just ask you to turn to those people who used to turn to apart from Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Iblis, he continues, Shaitan, he continues, he says, I made a promise to you. He would say that he is a sincere advisor to us. He would also trick us into thinking that we were doing good. And he says, I broke that promise. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He made a promise. But Allah Azza wa Jal, His promise is the truth. And so He fulfilled that promise. And so this is what we have to picture when we are disobeying Allah, when we are following Shaitan. What will happen on that day when the evil people will be punished and they will turn to Iblis. They will turn to the other people who they had followed, their evil ways, and they won't be able to help them in any way. Therefore, turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. It is His guidance that we follow. It is His assistance that we need. And then after this, Allah Azza wa Jal, He also gives the example of the good word and the bad word. He compares the good speech, whatever good that we say, and that is the Quran, that is the guidance of the Quran. He says, He compares that to a good tree. Its roots are firmly established, and its branches are high up in the sky, and they bear good fruit for people to eat. This is the example of a good word. This is the example of our religion. This is the example of the Quran. And the evil word, the evil speech, its example is like that of a rotten tree that has been uprooted to the surface of the earth. It has no stability. It has no goodness within it. And so then Allah Azza wa Jal, He says He keeps the believers firm with the firm word in this world as well as in the hereafter. And the wrongdoers, they're the ones who go astray. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to keep us firm, to give us that firm word in this world as well as in the hereafter. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions some of the other favors of His upon us for us to reflect on them. Are we grateful for them? Do we show gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal for those favors that He has given to us? And then after this, Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam leaving his family in the barren desert valley of Mecca. And this, once again, if you imagine the context in which it's revealed in Mecca to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the Quraysh as well. These are the descendants of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam is the one who settled his family there. This is a reminder for them to think about their father Ibrahim alayhi salam and the guidance that he was upon. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He begins to mention the trust that he had in Allah and the dua that he made for his offspring and for his child and his wife who he had kept in that barren desert valley. And so when we read these verses, we once again see that Allah Azza wa Jal is asking us to remain steadfast, to remain firm, and to put our trust in Allah Azza wa Jal, in the same way that Ibrahim alayhi salam did so. And look at the great rank that Ibrahim alayhi salam has in our faith, amongst all faiths actually. When you look at the Jews, you look at the Christians, you look at the Muslims, they all honor him, they all respect him, they all venerate him. But what is it that got him there? It was his tawakkul, it was his obedience, it was his submission. And so we too should incorporate those characteristics in our life. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, He finishes the surah off by mentioning the last day, and He mentions the state of that day, where the skies will be changed, and everything will be changed. All that we see around us, that we consider to be the earth and the heavens and all this, everything will be changed. And we will all be brought forth to Allah Azza wa Jal. And on that day, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions the result of the evil actions of the evil people, so that we stay away from those evil actions. We submit to Allah. And once again, at the time that this was revealed, this is a call to the Quraysh to remember that day, to stop doing all that they're doing, remembering that that day is surely to come. And if they forget about that, then they can continue doing as they please. But in the same way that Allah Azza wa Jal, He was able to raise Yusuf alayhi salam above his brothers in this life, He will do the same with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to benefit from the Quran. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make this a witness for us on the Day of Judgment, not against us. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.